So this is in a completely different landscape and a completely different environment. It's in an internal basin at the bottom, at the south end of New Zealand, not far from Queenstown. But it's the part of New Zealand that gets the hottest and the coldest. So it's the most extreme temperature in New Zealand, and it's this quite barren kind of, but very beautiful kind of landscape. And our sort of question on this was that our clients sort of declared a love of camping, and I think it actually brought the site while they were camping, and we just tried to work up this idea of how would you make an encampment on the site, but in a way that was more that left the site untouched. So as a kind of a frontier, that you're pitching your tent and you've got this house, and we have to make the house so that it's super insulated and can cope with really cold and really hot, but at the same time it doesn't change anything about the landscape. So that was the sort of starting point for it. And then just on a planning level, it was really about during the winter months, it's really cold outside, and so we sort of set the house up as like you would a tent, with the most important bits in the middle, and then the gap around the edges that you circulated in, as a way of you could hunker down in the middle of it, and then in the summer you'd always be on the edge of it.
It's an unusual house for us, I think, in that because of the location, it's quite solid. It's caused us some issues over the years about how can you describe something as a tent that's made out of concrete. And so Jeremy's right, that notion of tent is more in terms of the organisation and the way we use the collection of spaces. But it's quite an innovative approach to the way we moderate temperature and some of the materials we've chosen as well, with the freezer panel on the roof in places, the mass and the insulation.
So around the edges of it, it's got freezer panel sort of screens, eave screens, which do a couple of things. One, and the winter sun is incredibly low. I mean, it's probably more like, not as low as Scandinavia, but it's close. It's low, and so we use those kind of panels to bounce the low light back into the house in winter, and then in summer we use them to kind of as a big louver to funnel a breeze. So there's sort of a few environmental things, but it's also quite referential, a bit like the offset house was sort of referential back to these sheds. That part of New Zealand is it was a big gold mining, big sort of gold mining thing. So there was a lot of crazy people living in tents, gold panning, and in frontier kind of New Zealand. And so the house sits. It's in a kind of a field of time, which was introduced during the gold rush, and has kind of become wild in that part of the country. But and the time grows about 200 millimeters high, and the floor level is set at the same height. So it has a sort of extension of external slabs that you can walk around outside, which are all at the top of the time. So it's sort of like you're floating when you walk above these little flower, this little grass, which at some time of the year turns purple flower. So it's amongst all its weight about thermal mass and being able to cope with this environment, it's also quite light. Right, so it reads as it's quite a light building. It doesn't feel as an incredibly heavy building when you're there. Yeah.
And it's another, I don't know if this is deliberate, but it's another house with no fences, yeah? It's another house that sits in its landscape where we're not trying to parcel off the bit of land that our client owns. We're almost trying to borrow a much broader and pretty magnificent setting from the spaces around it. I mean, it's a very deliberate act not to have a formal garden or to have any sense of enclosure of the site.